here. We've got another round of amazing conversations left. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our next guest. She's the Chief Policy Officer at SPUR, one of the top policy think tanks in San Francisco. Please welcome Sujata Srivastava. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so obviously this is a topic you all have been studying for a long time. We are a few years out now from the pandemic, so let's start with what's going well and what's not going well from a policy standpoint.
Well, from a policy standpoint, a lot of it has to do with just the narrative of San Francisco, and that I think has really changed in the last year and a half, where you start seeing a lot more positive stories about the city, and partly that's because of the positive changes that have happened on the ground. So you see more people returning to the office, some more tourism and convention business starting to come back, and then some of the public policy interventions that have been put into place, like events, creating more opportunities for pop-up businesses. All of that is kind of generating a sense of, okay, San Francisco is on the rebound. But all of this is going to take a long time. So office vacancy rates, I think, are still at 34%. You still have a lot of vacant storefronts. And so I think there's still a longer-term set of solutions that need to be put into place to really create that transformational change that we'd like to see.
Got it. So long-term transformational change, what would you say are some of the top policy kind of initiatives that need to be put in place?
Yeah, so one of them is really creating more opportunities for different kinds of uses downtown. So we have been doing a lot of work on office to residential conversions, not because that's going to solve our housing crisis, but because we think it's a great opportunity to revitalize downtown and create workforce housing and affordable housing. Some of that work has been done, and now it's really just a matter of the market responding to those interventions. Another one is we really have to make sure that our transit operators can continue to be sustainable. There's a huge funding need in the short term, and in the longer term, there's a business model change that we can talk about a little bit later that needs to happen so that transit is really essential for downtown. And then third, I think we need a different kind of approach to public-private partnerships in San Francisco, where there are new tools and new governance structures that enable the kinds of investments that are needed to really catalyze those transformational projects. There are a lot of examples of that in Denver, in New York, in Philadelphia, of these entities that are really focused on downtown and can really create a lot more opportunities for public and private investment.
Jumped a couple of questions, jumping around, huh? You answered a lot, actually, of what I was planning to ask, but I think one of the first things we can touch on is the multiple different kind of steps the city has taken to attract foot traffic downtown. As you mentioned, office to housing conversions, we've had a lot of block parties, Vacant to Vibrant is another program that's seen a lot of success. How would you evaluate the efficacy of these programs?
I think it's great to give people more reasons to be downtown than just work, especially as we're kind of seeing a 3-day work week for most office workers right now. So I think that having other reasons to be downtown or stay longer or attract tourists. I mean, it's interesting to me when I go to Bon Grand Beats or First Thursdays downtown, how many people are from other cities in the Bay Area that are coming to downtown San Francisco because they just want to have a good time.
It's a big event, yeah.
So I think it's great for just having that, thinking of downtown as more than just an office hub. I think, though, that there are some limitations to just having an events-based strategy. We do need to think about what are the more permanent ways that we're going to create those structural changes that allow for more housing, allow for better connectivity to the neighborhoods so that, growth in the neighborhoods is being felt downtown and vice versa. Chinatown, for example, really needs downtown office workers to thrive. And office workers enjoy the opportunity of being able to visit Chinatown. So I think that kind of mutual benefit of downtown and the neighborhoods needs to be a little bit strengthened too.
Yeah, totally agree. Chinatown was one of the highlights when we were growing up here. So You've talked a little bit about rethinking office building uses, importance of diversifying the types of programming we see. We've seen events, talked a little bit about that. Let's get into some of the business programs. With Vacant to Vibrant, the city kind of brought a new pop-up model that did really well downtown, and now we're seeing other neighborhoods kind of do a similar version. So how do we make sure that while we're scaling it up, we are also maintaining its impact?
Yeah, I mean, what's great about Vacant to Vibrant is that it does two things. It kind of helps with the perception because you don't have the vacant storefront, so you create a more attractive environment. And it also is creating opportunities for entrepreneurs to have a location downtown and making it less costly and easier for them to open a business. To be able to kind of scale from that success, I mean, luckily a lot of those businesses have been able to then convert their short-term pop-up into a permanent lease. And that's what you want to see. You also want to see it with like some of the artists that have been able to participate in Vacant to Vibrant. It's not just cafes and restaurants. It's a wide variety of different kinds of things that we'd like to see downtown. Now we can see that property owners see the benefit of it. Anecdotally, we've heard that having that ground floor occupied means it's easier to lease the upper floors. It's easier to attract tenants to their buildings. So now I feel like the model has to be a combination of private sector participation. So property owners seeing the benefit of discounting the leases in those ground floor spaces, some philanthropic investment, which we've already started to see, and those lower interest loans and other kinds of financing tools that make it easier for small businesses to operate. And then the city has its part to do with things like streamlining permitting, making fees, big topic, yeah. Making fees less of a barrier for small businesses. We did a study that showed that a food truck has to go through 44 steps to get a permit and interact with 7 or 8 different agencies. It shouldn't be that difficult. Most small business owners aren't set up to do that. And so the extent to which you can remove some of those barriers, these are all kinds of structural changes that I think can help you scale up a program like Vacant to Vibrant.
Yeah, the permitting process is notoriously long in San Francisco, so I think that's definitely something on a lot of small business owners' minds as well. So you've written before that city leaders must let go of the pre-pandemic version of downtown and embrace a new vision. For you, what does that new vision look like? Are there other structural governance changes that need to happen?
Yeah, I mean, part of why we wrote that is because I think people romanticize how wonderful downtown was pre-pandemic or how wonderful San Francisco was, but it was not affordable for a lot of small businesses. It was not affordable for a lot of residents. There was a lot of traffic congestion. There were a lot of other issues and it was a bit of a monoculture in terms of just like having a lot of tech office concentration and not a lot of other types of things. So if you flip that around, I think the future vision we'd like to see is a downtown that's really much more inclusive of different kinds of uses, that is much more welcoming to different folks of different income levels and different businesses, and also, has the transit access that's already there is something that's really an asset for being able to create all of that density of uses and a mix of things. I think in terms of governance changes, we've really been thinking a lot about what kind of entity is needed to be able to implement that longer term vision.
Entities as in?
As like a public-private type of organization, sort of something that's independent of the city, but can still access some of the city's funding and financing resources and combine them with the private sector. So in most cities, they have something like what we used to have in California, which were redevelopment agencies. Right. And these were sort of independent agencies. They were enabled by state legislation and they were accountable to the public, but they were able to act much more entrepreneurial to offer certain kinds of incentives and do much more business attraction types of activities, do more of the marketing, having that expertise of like being able to put deals together. So if you're confronted with something like the Westfield Mall, which is a huge challenge, you have an entity that's really thinking about, okay, how are we going to transform that and be proactive about it and not just rely on the property owners to gradually come to something that pencils out. So there's a combination of things that an entity like that could offer. So we've been thinking about, what would that look like if you were to create that same kind of a capacity in San Francisco to really be dedicated on downtown San Francisco and its transformation.
Something more centralized than what we currently have.
Right, and something that could generate some resources to be able to address some of the affordability needs that we have, to be able to put in some of the other kinds of necessary things that make a downtown feel inclusive and whole.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the tech component from previous years. Now we're kind of entering a new era with the AI boom. And as we know, the 996 work week is very popular here. So when it comes to thinking about affordability and then also thinking about the larger downtown ecosystem, how do you foresee that altering things?
Yeah, I mean, I think Noah spoke earlier about just how exciting it is to see this AI boom in San Francisco and being the hub of that. And I think it's been a really great driver for leasing activity, especially in some of those higher end buildings. You're seeing them really being the ones that are taking up new space. Yeah. And that's great for the city. I do think that we have to be cautious about not creating the same pattern that existed before, where we're relying primarily on one sector to be able to drive the economic recovery. To the extent that AI can also generate other types of investments or partnerships with universities and partnerships with other small businesses, or those kinds of other secondary effects. I think that could be really much more impactful for San Francisco than just a few startup firms taking up a few 100,000 square feet of space.
Right. Yeah, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the diverse portfolio. And then lastly, in terms of transportation, obviously there's a huge deficit with funding, as you mentioned. What does your research show about the kind of business model that's needed to ensure the infrastructure can sustain operations and that we're not going to be at risk of service cuts in the future?
Yeah, what happened is that especially BART and Muni were so successful with ridership that they were able to finance a lot of their budget just through fares and parking revenues, so from users. And now that ridership is much lower than it was before the pandemic, there's a big gap. Yeah. You can't really cut your way out of it, because then you end up in a situation where BART trains are running every hour. And that's not gonna help us revitalize downtown. So I think that the key here is finding new funding sources, so we can't just cut service. We have to actually think about new funding sources. There's been more investment from the state recently. We need to make that a more permanent type of investment. California underinvests in transit compared to other states. Yeah. There's a huge opportunity there. The other part of the business model is transit does have to change the way that it operates to be a lot more friendly to users. And some of that is going to be about really improving the quality of the service. It's about also addressing one of their biggest barriers is that they have a hard time hiring operators.
Oh, okay.
So there's a workforce shortage. They really have to think about what our hiring systems look like, how do we change that to be more efficient and to be able to recruit the talent that we need. And they also have to start thinking, I think, more seriously about why are we having such a hard time delivering big transit projects at budget and on schedule, right? Because that burden then carries into the operations. And so there are some transformations that have to happen on the operator side. Got it. But we also can't starve our agencies, expect them to fix these problems and risk the actual service from being delivered.
Yeah, I feel like it oftentimes feels like we have the same conversation every few years when it comes to transit. So hopefully there will be a bigger picture vision at the end of all of this. We are unfortunately out of time. I would love to talk to you more. Obviously, there's so much to discuss, but thank you so much for being here. Thanks.